With that, I'd like to introduce our first keynote speaker, Mr. Mark DiFraia, is the Senior Director of Solution Strategy for MorphoTrust, a role he's held since about June of 2010, somewhere in there. Prior to that, he was part of what was then called L1 Identity Systems. And going even further back, he spent a lot of time in the financial technology industry, working on the New York Stock Exchange and all that type of stuff. You can see he's got a nice suit, so some residuals from that. So he's going to give us a great overview of what's to come in the identity space. And one interesting note, to pump him up a little bit, is his company was one of 3 grant awardees announced yesterday by the NSTIC, and they're going to be focused on tax refund fraud. So congratulations to you and your company on that award, and the floor is yours.
All right, thanks so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for the lovely intro, and thank you all for having me. I'm going to walk around a little bit so we're not kind of stuck to the podium for too long. Really excited to be here with you all today. Been looking forward to this talk for quite some time, and I hope that the time we spend here in the next 30 minutes turns out to be really worthwhile for you. And then maybe it gives you a couple of different ways of looking at some of the things happening around us. In January 2014, I got a call at my house from American Express letting me know that they thought that there were some issues going on with my credit card. So they asked me, are you in the greater New York area? I said, well, no, I'm hanging out at my house here in Billerica, Massachusetts with some family after the holidays. And they said, well, that's too bad because your American Express Platinum card is making transactions in the greater New York area. Well, that's too bad. So obviously we got right into the business of shutting the card off, reimbursing the transactions, and all the things that we're used to doing whenever that happens to us. But I started asking some more questions, of course, being in the identity business. This is a great opportunity to learn something. So got into the talk, and he's walking me through all the different transactions that were taking place. And I noticed a little bit of a pattern. You heard in the intro, I used to work for the New York Stock Exchange, so I used to spend a lot of time in Lower Manhattan. And here's a little map of that area from Brooklyn into New Jersey, Manhattan. And what I noticed in the transactions that the person was describing to me was that, first of all, the card was a victim of the target breach. So within 30 days, my card had been reproduced and was being used on the ground in the greater metro area of New York City. But as we got into the talk about where all these transactions were taking place, we saw a pattern every day. Folks would wake up down here in Brooklyn. They'd make a little walk over to Dunkin' Donuts, buy a coffee, buy a gift card. Then they go to Duane Reade, local drugstore, get another gift card. They go to the rack and buy the little gift cards for Home Depot or whatever else. They go around Brooklyn, make a couple more transactions, and then they'd head off to New Jersey, make some more transactions there. But you see they make a little stop in Manhattan for lunch. Go hit Chipotle, Wendy's, those kinds of things. And then finally they'd end the day over in New Jersey at the Olive Garden and the Longhorn Steakhouse and Wendy's and Dunkin' Donuts, again, buying gift cards and doing all that kind of stuff. Clearly, these are not places where I go, right? I don't eat at those kinds of places. I maintain this figure by eating at those kinds of places. But it got me thinking. So I asked the gentleman, I said, it's great we're taking care of the transactions, but what about these guys? We know where they're going to go tomorrow. We know tomorrow afternoon, someone's going to walk into the Olive Garden tomorrow afternoon and try to buy a $200 gift card. Why don't we try to do something with local law enforcement and try to get these guys? Because I guarantee it's not just my credit card that's in their pocket. They probably got 10 to 12 other ones, right? They're executing on a strategy. So why don't we try to stop them? Well, American Express, so they do have some remediation, but it's really not what they're in the business of. With me, they don't want to go through that. But they did say I could call law enforcement and open a complaint and give them a statement and try to work it that way. So I did. So I looked at the map, and I thought, all right, if I'm going to make a phone call here and try to do something, am I going to call Brooklyn? No way. I'm going to get buried in all the stuff that's going on in Brooklyn every day. So I looked for the smallest town I could find in New Jersey that had transactions going on, and I called the local police department, and I told them exactly what happened. And what they said was, well, sir, unfortunately, I can't just go put an officer in the Olive Garden this afternoon. That's not how it works, right? You've got to call your local police department and get something started. So I said, all right, I'll pull the thread a little bit more. And I called the Billerica Police Department in Billerica, Massachusetts, and they sent a cruiser to the house, and a nice officer came in and took a statement from me. And at the end of it all, she said, look, I'm going to be honest with you. probably nothing's going to happen from this, right? No, not a big surprise to all of us in the room. A sting is a big deal. Takes a lot of resources, takes a lot of time. We're probably not going to be able to go catch these guys. And of course, I wasn't surprised, but I really did want to go through the process and see what was going to happen and just where it would break down. And it really does point to that unfortunate reality of what we have today. Last year alone, 12.7 million Americans had their identity stolen to the tune of $16 billion in 1 year. These are probably not new facts for those of us in the room that work in this business all the time. You guys are pretty well aware of the stats. About 330,000-ish tax returns were stolen from the IRS this year. We all know about that. We also know there's about another 300,000 records that those fraudsters have of PII that wasn't used yet to perpetrate any kind of crime, but they have it. And the last one here is just under 800 tracked cases of US data breaches last year, a 27% increase year over year from the prior year. This is a terribly unfortunate reality. It's not getting better. Trending up in a very big way. Even more scary are the sectors that lead the way. Medical health, number one. Medical records. Stuff about us and all of our medical concerns. Very scary times. But when I look at these stats, one of the things I think about is what happens when the transaction doesn't involve any money? All I hear about are the credit card transaction that I have to be reimbursed for, shutting off the credit card, making sure that nobody else can make purchases on it, and quickly getting me back to the business of spending my money. But if someone steals your PII and they haven't yet used it to steal from you, is it any less important? Do you care about it less if someone takes your PII and puts it in their pocket and holds on to it for a couple of years before they go do something with it? I think we probably do care, but I want you to hold that thought. My thought for you today is what we have here is a true epidemic. It's an epidemic, the size and scope of which we've seen in the past, usually in cases like this that involve disease, but the impact is equal. The plague impacted 30 to 60% of Europeans. We talk about polio in the United States as a big epidemic. At its height, it had about 60,000 cases here in the United States and 3,000 deaths in 1 year. That disease was all about eradicated in just a couple of years once the vaccination was introduced. But at its height, it only represents less than 0.5% of those that were impacted financially by identity theft last year. It's quite a perspective if you think about it. So, for identity, where's our vaccination? Where are the teams of people that are working round the clock to solve this problem completely so we never have to worry about it again? So it goes the way of polio. Again, hold that thought. Many of you are here in the room that are working on those things. So the identity epidemic just simply cannot continue. We cannot operate the most sophisticated economy the world has ever seen or known at a time when our very identities are up for grabs every day and always at risk. That's a reality we can't live with. That can't be our new normal. So we're at a time where we need to take some urgent action as a nation to address the issue head on. And everybody here in this room, I think, has a hand in it, is trying to do something about it. So in the abstract, I talked about bringing a story from my background in financial services. Again, I spent probably 10, 15 years in financial services before I came into the identity space. And there is a good story to share from the financial services business. I don't know if anybody here has ever heard of FIX, Financial Information Exchange. Anybody in the room? A couple hands? All right, good. This is only a couple, so this won't be redundant for folks. FIX was a messaging protocol that revolutionized Wall Street. It stands for Financial Information Exchange. It was introduced in 1992, and it's open source. It's a grassroots effort. Fixprotocol.org manages it. And it was a combination of both technology and the leadership of some of Wall Street's most important companies. Some of the leaders from Fidelity, Goldman Sachs, for example, got together and said, we can't keep doing business the old way. We can't be picking up the phone every time we want to move 50,000 shares of IBM and calling everybody all over the street trying to find a buyer or a seller. We have to get more automated. We got to know that the deal is firm. So they introduced Fix. And the results of Fix was that the game changed dramatically from that point on. Gone were the days of picking up the phone and calling every broker on the book because the portfolio manager wanted to move 50,000 shares of IBM today. Used to be you had to call everybody and put the word out. I want to sell 50,000 today, and then everybody would call you back. Very, very inefficient. It slowed things down. It was error prone, lots of problems. So when the Fix protocol was brought into place, it made that order process automated now. So traders could go out, and instead of just putting the word out to that one broker, they could put the word out to all of them. It was just as easy to communicate with 1,000 as it was to communicate with one. And the impact was huge. This chart here just shows the S&P 500 performance in that period of time from 1992 on. Massive explosion in performance, especially when you hold it up against median household income and nominal GDP. They are all growing, but the S&P as an indicator of the market grew at an exponential rate to that. Now there's a lot going on during that time. We had dot-com stuff going on and Y2K and lots of things happening in the industry, but the fact of the matter is once the automation came into play and the common language came into play, the markets benefited. And if you don't believe that, here's another chart that shows the volume explosion of Wall Street. This chart tells it all. What used to require a phone call to a broker to get things started became completely automated, and it created an industry that never existed before. Things like dark pools, alternative trading systems, 24 exposed US equity market exchanges where you could get an order done. And then it brought into scope some other things like algorithmic trading, program trading, high frequency trading, all these things you hear about on Kramer from time to time, are all advents of and results of what the Fix protocol did. Massive, massive impact. This is Sam Johnson. Sam Johnson was the CEO, president of NYSE Technologies when I went over there. And he was really critical to this whole movement. He used to be with Goldman Sachs, and he left Goldman as this was all starting up and formed a company called Transact Tools because, like I mentioned, the Fix protocol movement created an industry, and he built a company that sold Fix engines. They would make Fix interoperable for you. And it started off with the trade orders and all that. But this is a little quote from Sam. Fix drove major change and revolutionized securities trading across Wall Street. The premise of Fix at first was simply to solve a couple of problems with technology, speed and reach and communications between trading partners. All we wanted to do was connect the trading partners. But it exploded from there. It took on a way bigger scope than even Sam thought it was going to take on, because it went on from just orders to my indications of interest. Quotes moved on to the Fix protocol. All the post-trade processing moved on to the Fix protocol. Amazing amounts of new things took place. And then a funny thing happened. People realized, well, now I've got an audit trail. Instead of that phone call that the guy says he doesn't remember that trade that we made, and then the market moved, and all of a sudden nobody wants to do that deal anymore, now I've got it all documented and auditable. So the trade became the electronic record representing all the component elements of the back and forth relationship between trading partners. It could be archived, audited, interactive. I could interact with thousands of trading partners. And as a result, the markets became more efficient, deeper, and more connected than they'd ever become before. That little company, Transact Tools, went on to become the gateway provider to Archipelago. I don't know if you guys remember Archipelago. And Archipelago got bought by NYSE, and that little company became part of NYSE, formed NYSE Technologies. Big explosion. Today, it's the language of Wall Street. And we're much better off for it. So that's really encouraging for things like IDESG and FIDO Alliance and all the initiatives that we're starting to work on that are truly grassroots. They're bringing those smart people together with a desire to solve the problem, and they're bringing their tools to the table and they're driving it forward. It's not regulators forcing it upon us. It's the market getting together to solve the problems themselves. But unfortunately, it's not just about technology, right? It's a lot more than that. FIX was impressive because it did revolutionize Wall Street. It was industry initiated and managed. It was not regulated. It wasn't forced upon the marketplace. You weren't told you had to do it. And it left amazing room for innovation, as Sam will tell you. He's had a pretty nice life as a result of what the FIX movement did. But Wall Street forgets about some people sometimes. Typically, the individual struggles to find their way in the Wall Street world. The subprime mortgage crisis, credit default swap debacle, buy and hold strategies. These are my favorites. We're supposed to buy and hold and put our money in a 401k plan and hold it till we retire. Don't trade very much. Keep it there. It'll mature. Over time, the market does great. The guys that I showed you in that chart with the explosive volume, they trade 2,000 orders a second. I'm pretty sure that they got the inside track. I think 2,000 orders a second makes a little bit more money than buy and hold. But that's what we're told to do. And lastly, most people just don't understand the system at all. You sit down with a financial planner. I know my mom and dad, when they sit down with their financial planner, it's a little bit of, translation. They got to sit in the room and kind of help them understand what's going on. So in many ways, they kind of fall short when it comes to the individual, but they're really good at automating and keeping things inside the industry really tight and fast. So our business needs that same kind of revolution, but it's got to cover all the bases. If it's going to cure the epidemic, it has to do far more than just connect us all with a protocol. A data dictionary and a protocol is not going to get it done. It's got to be about us as individuals. It has to be about our individual understanding of what's happening. And not just those of us that are here in this room that are kind of in this business, but all the people outside this room that don't understand this stuff. They need to have a solid understanding of what's going on and their place in it. Privacy needs to be at the core of everything that's going on. The movement of PII has to be cared for, unlike the flashlight app, right? If you guys read the news a couple months ago about the flashlight app, put the flashlight app on your phone and it steals your contacts database and tells the manufacturer of that app exactly what you're doing with your phone. Wasn't exactly what I signed up for when I got the flashlight app, but that's what happens. And lastly, consent. Anytime my identity is going to be used for some sort of transaction or otherwise, I need to be able to have a say. Every one of us in this room should be able to have a say. Whenever our PII is going to be used for anything under any circumstances, we should have a say. And I'm happy to report that I do see that groundswell in our business. There is a focus on privacy. There is a focus on consent. I'm seeing it in all the NSTIC projects that are going on. It's a constant discussion within the IDESG channels. Our folks at University of Texas Center for Identity talk about it all the time. I know the FIDO Alliance cares about it too. So that's good news. We have that thread inside the work that we're starting to do. Equally good news is that we don't have to do it on our own back with our own dime. The market's growing at an amazing rate, and this is where me as a financial services guy, my head exploded a little bit last year. I bought Markets and Markets multi-factor authentication market report last year because I was doing some homework inside the company about new things we could do and where the market was going to go and how we could shape it. And as I'm reading through the sectors in North America, I'm seeing 16 to 22+% growth for the next 5 to 7 years. That's insane. That's astronomical growth for any market to experience. So we have an amazing challenge on our hands, but we have an amazing amount of money coming into the system that's going to help us pay for it. We have another source of income coming from startups The investment capital is getting directed towards this problem. So new startups are coming in all the time. I know you've seen lots of them, trying to address different pieces of the problem and bring new technologies to the table. And equally important, we have the industry groups emerging and getting stronger that are going to help us lead the way. So it's very encouraging what we have in front of us. It's a great opportunity. So earlier I asked you to hold that thought about, does it matter if my PII is stolen and nobody's used it for a financial transaction yet? The answer is yeah, of course it does. And back when the first rules of the game were set, sitting in a room probably a lot like this, the banks, credit card companies, retailers, those who are in the business of transactions got together and they set the rules of the game. What risk can I live with? What risk can you live with? Card present transaction fees, card not present transaction fees. Everybody made sure that they had some level of risk built into the model and that it worked and the transactions could happen. But we weren't at the table. We weren't all at the table to have our input in a very focused, meaningful way. And that's one of the challenges that we have. Those of us that are working on this problem right now need to be thinking about the individual. Who's going to speak for them? Who's going to fill that empty chair? What's good enough to do the trade? What's good enough to open the account? Why do you need these pieces of information from me in the first place? What are you going to do with it? How are you going to store it? Are you going to keep it safe? Someone needs to be advocating for all of us as individuals. And within our project teams and all the work that we're doing, we need to find room for that. So, as we pause here for a moment, I think back, well, are we much better off now than we were when American Express called me, back in January of 2014? Unfortunately, I'd say probably not much has changed yet, right? Nothing big, nothing earth-shattering. But we clearly do have a unique opportunity. Plenty of money coming into the system, plenty of leadership emerging, a big problem to solve. We're truly at a crossroads as an industry to decide what we're going to do. At times like this, commercial entities can go one of two ways. You can see that money on the horizon and you can go find a way to maximize your piece of it. But when a problem as big as this presents itself, we have to throttle that with solving the problem completely. Because we have a unique period of time to take advantage of that funding. That money's not going to be there forever. After 5 to 7 years, who knows where it goes? Another sector might heat up, and that money dries up, and we're going to be left with what we're left with to try to innovate. So what do we want to have accomplished? When we look back 10 years from now, this point in time, the realities that we were dealing with, what are we going to want to have accomplished? What legacy is this group, this place in time in our industry, going to leave behind for the next folks? What our epidemic calls for is a response equal to the challenge. Earlier in the presentation, I talked about polio. Dr. Salk didn't go off on a campaign to try to figure out how to treat it or how to make some money on it. He and his staff got together and said, this is a problem to be solved completely. And he partnered up with his friends at Harvard to figure out a way to be able to grow his vaccination safely so that it could address all the people it needed to address. He responded to the challenge in a way that was equal to the problem. It was one of my favorite stories. After the bombing of Pearl Harbor, Henry Ford dedicated his production to the war effort. Ford was making airplanes and tanks and munitions and all kinds of other things that the war effort needed to respond to the biggest challenge of the day. I can't even imagine today seeing an auto manufacturer effectively shut down their auto production and dedicate their work to the war effort. But that's what he needed to do. That's what the nation needed him to do, and that's what he did. And this all points back to a very interesting point in time for us as Americans, the greatest generation. We talk about them all the time. Tom Brokaw did a fantastic piece on the greatest generation not too long ago. I don't know if you saw it, but he points out that these folks had developed this amazing set of values of personal responsibility, duty, honor, and faith. And that at every stage of their lives, they were a part of historic challenges and achievements, the magnitude of which the world had never seen before. So as we think about where we are, and that crossroads that we sit at, and the decisions in front of us, and the actions we're going to take to respond to our challenge, I want you to think about what those folks did. What were their decisions like? But no matter what, they fell back to doing the right thing and solving the problem. And that's our opportunity. Last night, so I was kind of prepping for today, I was out on YouTube and I was looking around for some things from Dr. Salk. And I hadn't built it into the presentation, but he had a little piece in there that talked about, this was later on, this is like 1985, he was sitting down for an interview, and he asked, what kind of ancestors we were going to be. That was his big question, was what kind of ancestors are we going to be? What kind of world are we leaving behind? And he was optimistic. He thought that we would use science and technology for the betterment of everyone, as opposed to the opposite. And I agree. So as we get ready to wrap up, the challenge I think for all of us is to think of ourselves at this point in time as the greatest generation in identity. And to pull that off, to truly solve the problem, it's going to take a true sense of purpose focused on every single individual in this room and not in this room to accomplish the goal. It's going to take every single one of us to think about what we're good at. Henry Ford didn't design airplanes. He just made a whole bunch of them real fast and with a high degree of quality. And we got to identify where the help is going to come from. Because very few of our companies or agencies or anybody else are going to be able to solve this problem from soup to nuts. It's going to take help. It's going to take partnering to get there. So we got to figure out where the help is going to come from. Dr. Salk could not have produced his vaccination if he didn't have the help of Harvard University to get him over the hump. So as we wrap up here, I want to leave you with a couple of key things. In my opinion, this is our time. It's our time because we have the industry revenue to fuel us. It's our time because we have the industry organizations to lead the way. It's our time because we have the smart people that we need to solve these problems with technology and research and all that other work that needs to get done. And most importantly, we have a challenge that is worthy of our absolute best effort. This is our time. Thank you very much.